Good evening. Welcome to all of you. I'm Irene Stein. I have the honor of being the chair of the amazing Tompkins County Democratic Committee. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank the candidates for being willing to serve. I want to thank a certain group of people, they might want to rise, called the Read-sisters. Get it? They are Jamie and, come on, who are you? Show your faces.
Hear, hear.
They put together this event from soup to nuts. There wasn't a single detail that I had to do, I believe. So that's never happened to me before in my chair's life, and I'm indebted to them. They did a great job, right? And I especially want to thank the League of Women Voters. Kay Sharp is their president. Their willingness to serve the community is exemplary. We're very grateful, and I'm going to turn it right over to Kay Sharp.
I don't think so either. They turned it on, but we're all right.
Hello? Hello?
Modern technology. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you, Irene. The League is very pleased to moderate tonight's candidate forums. I think the first thing I would like to do is to introduce the candidates to you. And I have my little cheat sheet. There's Max Della, if you could stand. Rick Gallant. Ian Coldman. Tracy Mitrano. Eddie Sundquist. Karl Warrington. Charles Whalen. They've allowed me to call them by their first name rather than saying first, last all the time when we're doing questions. Let me do a little bit of housekeeping with you first. I have 4 assistants. If they could just wave their hands so you know who they are. Jack? Okay. They have extra cards if you need extra cards, so just, kind of wave at one of them. And then Linda, who is in the blue jacket, she is going to bring me the cards, the question cards. And I want to also remind you that on your seat, you had a candidate response or feedback form. Is there anyone who didn't get one of those? It's very important for you to fill this out. These forms are intended to give the candidates some feedback and let them know how their performance tonight went. And this will help them as they prepare for the really upcoming, June 2018 primary. You can just leave them by the door, on the table by the door. It's totally anonymous. Don't put your name on them. The format for tonight is this. Each candidate will have 3 minutes as an opening comment. We'll then go to question and answer. Again, we will not be taking questions from the floor. You must write them on the cards, and they'll be brought to me, and I'll present them to the candidates. Given this size of crowd, I'm obviously not going to be able to get 200 questions in. So what I do, and I hope this is fine with you, is that I will sort the questions per topic, and then I'll try to use some of the language in the cards. If you don't hear your question exactly, that's not because I'm ignoring it. It's just that we've had several questions about the same topic. So then the candidates, after the question and answer period, they will have 2 minutes for closing statements. So it's 3, 1, and 2. For opening comments, we're just going to do it alphabetical, starting over at the other end.
Good evening. Thank you for being here, and thank you for setting this up. It's an honor to be here. My name is Della. I'm from Owego, New York, Tioga County, south of here. My wife Nancy and I have 3 grown children, 2 grandchildren, and a big black dog named Leo. I'm going to tell you why I'm running, why I'm qualified, and what I'd like to do for as your congressman. So, at 17, at the U.S. Air Force Academy, I took my first oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I consider special interests to be a domestic threat to our Constitution, and I feel duty-bound based on that oath to run against Tom Reed. I'm ready today to be your congressman. I have 30 years experience. I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. As an officer, a pilot, and a commander of an organization of over 1,260 airmen and women with over a $93 million annual budget. I've flown and served around the world, from the Middle East and Afghanistan to Antarctica. I've also served as a defense attorney. I've owned my own practice and worked for Lockheed Martin in business development. Early in my career, I had the honor of working for Senator Karl and the Secretary of the Air Force, Dr. Whitnall. During that period, I worked on both sides of the aisle, both on the House and the Senate, to help real people with serious problems. I didn't do it with bags of money, walking door to door, contributing campaigns. I did it with a passion to help people. And that's a common thread throughout my career, serving with integrity and caring about people. Thank you. Democratic values. So, I'd like to focus on 3 things. First of all, taxes. The tax program that Tom Reed has supported is a disaster for the middle class and small businesses and for District 23. It literally rewards those very same corporations that offshored our jobs. That's wrong. Jobs, we need to build our infrastructure, invest in our people, and build a new energy future and a internet broadband that's capable of keeping us forward in this new economy. So in closing, I'd like to say, please send me send me to Congress. I want to be your voice in Washington. Check out my website at votemaxdellapia.com and call me, email me, and challenge me to be your voice in Congress. Thank you.
Rick?
Hi, my name is Rick Gallant. I'm a teacher in the Corning Painted Post School District and have been for 18 years. I've been a teacher in 5 different states and a coach around the country. I'm also a member of the New York State United Teachers Board of Directors and have been a proud union member for my entire adult life. I'm going to thank everybody that put this on. Liz, I don't know where she went, but there were like 1,000 emails with housekeeping things, and I appreciate that. I appreciate the Tioga County Democratic Committee. I appreciate Irene and everything they've done, so thank you guys for that. I'm going to try to give you a couple of stories of 5 different people. The first one, and this kind of will set you where I come from. The first one is Dakota. Dakota was for health care, except she had to pay a fee once you got into the country. After that, everything was good. She now lives in Mansfield, Pennsylvania. She's on the exchange program, I know, because we're going through the renewal right as we speak. If she didn't have that, she just got married about 2 weeks ago. If she didn't have that, she would not have the confidence that she has to get pregnant and have a grandson or a granddaughter for me. And the last 2 I'm going to talk about are Kyle and Derek. Kyle and Derek were both students of mine and played on my teams in Corning. They're brothers. They started a tie. I'm guessing some of you have read about them. A tie and accessories company out of Corning. Those are the kinds of small businesses that we need to grow from the ground up. Not giving money for incentives, but giving the people that are actually here trying to start something, and I would include somebody like Ian with that. The small businesses that are local, we need to support them, and that's how our economy will grow. So thank you very much.
Ian?
So thank you to Liz, Jamie, and your crew, the League of Women Voters, the TCDC, and all of you here engaged in your community for making this evening's event possible. My name is Ian Golden. I grew up in rural PA, and I spent 18 years of my life based out of Tompkins County as a student and the founder and owner of several small businesses upstate. I'm here because I have 2 young daughters, and I could no longer sit back and watch our communities become increasingly divided, less sustainable, and with reduced opportunities for the future of their and their generation's future. I'm here because nearly 45% of all households across our district are having a tough time making ends meet. Too many are working multiple jobs with unlivable wages. Because in towns like Wellsville, there's a second-generation owner of a 90-year-old business that may have to be closing up shop on a once thriving Main Street, now dotted with vacant storefronts. Because their 2 larger employers, Dresser Rand and Alstrom, continue to shed jobs year over year with ripple effects outward into their economy. Where their local medical center, Jones Memorial Hospital, is struggling, as most rural centers are, to remain viable. Unfortunately, these stories are not unique to our district. But I'm also here because I have hope. I have hope in people like Ryan Wallace from Geneva, New York here, whose company is producing renewable microgrids to power homes and communities. For people like Pete Shira out in Jamestown, who not only has created a regional draw in Jamestown skate products, but is also associated with Fancher Furniture, the last of its kind, thriving furniture store in the once furniture capital of the world there in Jamestown. For people like Emily Okama in Trumansburg, who's assembled a weekly women's group, literally writing thousands of postcards to encourage change in our legislators. Because of Brad Treat here in Ithaca, who's leading the charge of high growth entrepreneurial startups through Rev here in Ithaca. We have work to do. We must reduce the influence of big money, strengthen voting rights, reinvigorate our local economies through revamping manufacturing towards sustainable and high-tech industries, rebuild infrastructure with an eye toward future demand, support communities and companies who keep business local and wages prevailing, join the rest of the developed world in moving toward a system of Medicare for all. To keep our farms and vineyards thriving and families intact, we must shift our resources to immigration reform, not just enforcement. Strengthen, not roll back, the rights and respect of all women and those in the LGBTQ community. I'm grateful to have the opportunity tonight to share the stage with so many qualified and passionate individuals. We, alongside so many others across our district, are stepping up to say enough is enough, and the status quo just isn't good enough. Whether winning or losing this round, together we're providing the reinforcement, new energy, and vision our communities and nation need. Together, with all of you, we can get there. Thank you.
Tracy?
Good evening, and I too echo thanks for all the organizers and their hard work, and all of you who are here keeping democracy alive. My name is Tracy Mitrano. As many of you know, I have lived in Ithaca for over 30 years. I taught at Ithaca College and Cornell University, raised my two boys who went through the Ithaca City School District. Shout out to the teachers, thank you. Practiced law, both in a firm as well as assigned counsel, and developed a career in internet policy and cybersecurity. As a member of the community, I was 10 years on the town planning board, member of the Tompkins County Broadband Committee, and a trustee of the Tompkins County Library. In this campaign, I have engaged issues of tax reform for working and middle class without that crushing deficit, education improvement, economic development, and jobs through internet deployment. Labor reform, we need a 21st century set of labor laws to correspond to a 21st century new economy. But tonight I would like to focus on two issues about which there has been misunderstanding on my positions: women's reproductive health and the environment. About abortion, I support legal, medically safe, available, and affordable abortion. I'm reading that off of my website. Moreover, this issue must be connected to women's health, including domestic violence and sexual abuse, addiction, contraception, child rearing, and other social supports for women, children, and families, not least to the goal of a universal health care system, preferably in a single-payer format. On the environment, I support the governor's ban on fracking. Let me be very clear. I oppose fracking. And I believe in the scientific method to understand climate change. And there are connections among immigration, climate change, and the environment. Climate change prompts a lot of immigration. Look at the sub-Saharan Africa or even in Central America. And yet the very people who demonize immigrants and deprive our family farms of their local labor force are also those who promote fracking, make their money off of fossil fuels, and make money off of industrial agriculture, the Kochs, for example. Furthermore, they poison our national debate on these issues, and to disguise their greedy 1%, they sow division among working and middle classes. It's about class, it's about race, and it's about big money dominating politics. The Democratic Party has to get their arms around this. The 23rd District has to get their arms around this. We have to connect the dots. We need comprehensive health care, and we need a comprehensive environmental policy in this district to address economic, social, and political effects, humanely and within the progressive and liberal tradition of the United States. I have the education, the experience, and the expertise to do just that for the people of the 23rd District. Thank you very much.
Eddie?
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you so much. I had a little trouble taking the microphone off, but I appreciate you waiting. So the one thing I would say is my name is Eddie Sundquist. Many of you see my name on the feedback form as EDDY. I found out today there's a street in Ithaca, and so someone was very excited to put that on the form instead of my name. But I'm fine with it, and I appreciate it. Like I said, my name is Eddie Sundquist. You know, I'm an attorney and a former teacher from Jamestown, and I was born and raised there. I grew up in a family of immigrants and union workers, and I got taught very early on about education and about helping others. And I've done that throughout my career. You know, after graduating high school, I moved off to Rochester, and I went to St. John Fisher College in Rochester, and I did my undergraduate degree, and I was the first in my family to graduate college. You know, it's an incredible thing to do, to be the first one to go through with so much support from my family and so much support from my friends. After Rochester, I moved to Philadelphia, and I went to the University of Pennsylvania. I see a gentleman with a Penn shirt up in front. I did my master's in education at night, and I actually was a teacher during the day. I taught at an alternative school. I did that for a few years, and I realized it was time to come home. It was time to come back to the area and back to my family that raised me. So I went and enrolled at the University of Buffalo Law School, did my law degree there, and went back home to practice law. So for the past couple years, I've been practicing law, representing injured workers and grieving families across this district. You know, I'll tell you, one of the reasons I jumped into this race is I realized very little has changed since I came home. We continue to see jobs and people leave in record numbers, and we're not doing anything about it. You know, the one thing that got me fired up, you may have remembered our President Donald Trump told all of the people of upstate New York to get up, pack up, leave your homes, and move to Wisconsin, right? Well, that didn't fire me up as much as the fact is that our representative, Tom Reed, said nothing. He said nothing when our president told his own people to leave. And that's not something that I would do. That is not something that we can do for our people. I'm a younger professional that came back to this district, came back to practice, to be with my family, to be with the people that raised me. And how dare you tell me, my family, and everyone else to get up and leave? This is the time when we want young folks to come back. This is the time when we need jobs to come back. And that's what we're going to do. That's what I'm committed to do. I'm committed to bringing back jobs. We deserve 21st century jobs in this district. Jobs that focus on green-collar work. Jobs that focus on changing our environment. I'm committed to the health care reform, and I'm committed to fixing the opioid crisis that we have here in this district. And I'm excited and honored to be running against Tom Reed. So thank you all.
Karl?
This off. How's everybody doing today? All right. I really am honored to be here. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and everybody who put this together. It's just fantastic. My name is Karl Warrington, and I'm a Presbyterian minister and a social worker. When I spent the last 10 years or so in Naples, New York, where I was the community organizer, the quintessential community organizer. Kind of know what happened to the last community organizer that we had run for office. Barack Obama is one of my heroes, of course. I spent the last 10, 15, 20 years really passionately fighting for the social gospel. A gospel which I believe is about reaching out to others, loving your neighbor, caring about the poor, making sure that when I have clothes on my back that I think somebody else should have clothes on their back that can at least afford it. I have always given my life, especially when it comes to the universal health care issue. I have spent the last, since 1993, if that gives you any idea, fighting for universal health care in my own little cyber world. I fought for the ACA. I was one of the 1 million people who helped to get it passed. In fact, I'm probably somewhere on the signing of that particular piece of legislation which I'm particularly proud of and I would love to fix. But I would also love to have a single-payer system. So I am ready to fight for a single-payer system because health care, folks, health care is not just a privilege, it's a right, it's a human right. I believe in an economy that serves 99% of us, not just the 1% of us. I believe in equal pay for equal work. I believe in a woman's right to choose. I believe in the LGBTQ cause. As a Presbyterian minister, as a Christian minister, some people would think, well, does he believe in those things? I believe in them, I support them, and I will fight for those rights every step of the way. I believe in protecting our environment and, of course, accepting the overwhelming evidence that climate change is real and it is caused by human activity. And I believe in our public schools. Our public schools are underfunded already, and to divert any more money to things like choice schemes and voucher schemes is unacceptable. So let's fight together for all these causes against Tom Reed and Donald J. Trump. Thank you very much.
Charles?
I'm Charles Whalen. To defeat Tom Reed, a candidate needs to unite our district. I can do that. What will unite the district is standing up for working people, retirees, and their families. Doing that reflects where I come from, what I've done throughout my career. Let me tell you a little bit about where I come from. My dad's a retired machinist. He began his career in the Marines. My mom's a first-generation Italian-American. She learned English as a second language. I'm the first in my family to attend university. I studied just a short few blocks from here. I started there nearly 40 years ago, and on my first day on campus, I met my wife. She's from Steuben County. After we were married, we lived there. About a year after my daughter was born, we moved to Geneva. We live in the same house today. Let me back up for just a second about the fact that I was a student in Ithaca. It took an extraordinary amount of work to get me there by my entire family. My dad worked a night shift in a factory, and he worked a second job mopping floors. It was an extraordinary effort by everyone in the family to get me to go to school. So I understand the value of that and the importance of that. And I think that resonates throughout the district. Standing up for working people is also what I've done throughout my career. It's not just where I come from. I'm an economist. I specialize in employment issues and economic policy. I didn't love economics as a university student. I studied it because I knew that it was important to master it, to defend working people against those people who use trickle-down theories as a way to justify bad policies, and we see that today. My career has taken me into factories, often at 4 in the morning, working with companies, workers, and community leaders, finding practical ways to save jobs and create new ones. It's taken me across Western New York, working with the labor movement and the business community, finding down-to-earth practical ways to create partnerships across 7 counties. Some of the projects I worked on involved employment and training. Others involved securing hydropower for companies looking to expand jobs. Most recently, I worked at the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, reporting on the economy and on the effects of taxes and spending on the economy. Standing up for working people is what will unite this district. I've lived and worked for nearly 40 years across this district, and I know, as I walked across this district and talked to people traveling during this campaign, I have found that my views have only been reinforced, that we do want the same things. We want good jobs and affordable health care. We want a promising future for our children, and we want a secure and dignified retirement. I know that message resonates with you, and I want you to work with me, join me in securing our future in that way. Thank you.
We're going to start our questions now. I would like to tell the candidates that you're only going to get 1 minute to answer each question. When you see the stop sign, finish your sentence and stop. If not, Jack will stand up. And I'm going to be rotating through you so that not everyone gets a chance to be first and everybody gets a chance to be last. So when I call your name, that means you're to answer the question.
Would you like us seated, just as a process question, or standing?
Oh, I think it's either way what you would choose. I think sitting is fine if you're comfortable doing that. Audience, I ask of you, please no clapping. We only have 1 minute per question. We don't want to steal it by clapping. We can clap at the end of the candidates forum. Thank you. Okay, first question. Covered up my signs. And this is for Max. How will you win where previous candidates against Reed have failed, especially considering Reed's vicious attack ads?
That's an excellent question. I believe I have the capability, the experience, the leadership, and the tools to be an effective congressman the first day I get to Washington. But more than that, I believe I'm the candidate that can gather the most voters to our social and economic justice program, social justice, our platform of social and economic justice. And I believe that I base that on my canvassing. For just a matter of days, I found that 65 of the people I talked to, Republicans and uncommitteds, said, I believe in what you say. I'm tired of what we see in Washington, and I want to support you and I want to become a Democrat. The largest number of Democrats we've seen in Tioga County was right after that. So, thank you.
The same question, Rick?
Sure. I mentioned before that I'm on the New York State United Teachers Board of Directors. I already represent pretty much the entire 23rd. I don't have Ithaca, I don't have Geneva in that northern part. So I already represent about 150 school districts. I have, to steal a line from Leslie Danks-Burke, I have a lot of front porches that I'm invited onto and can stand on. I already have those people that all know me. I have the largest footprint of any of us, and I think that that relationship that I've already had, I've been elected to 2 terms, that's a statewide election. I think that I have the wherewithal to bring that together and get those people organized and get those people rallied. When we go out and get signatures in March, it's going to be huge just to start that way. So I'm very confident because of my background with that.
Ian?
I'm going to mess up the flow and stand. I can't see the people in the back, so I'm assuming they can't see me. Other candidates, I apologize if I'm messing up that flow. But claps say maybe that's a good thing in the back, and hopefully this doesn't take my minute time. I'll get the desk stare here. So I think we've tried several things to defeat this incumbent. I can tell you from across the district, in prior candidates, what I hear most consistently is people loved Nate Shinagawa. I go around the district, they loved his energy, he was out there, and he got closer than anybody has. I don't know if any traditional campaign is going to defeat the current incumbent. I really think that it'll take a movement, and I'm here because, not to run a typical campaign, I'm here because I am part of a movement to make change. I'm also somebody who's been on the ground, I've been in the trenches, I'm wearing multiple hats. I'm a business owner, I've created jobs, and I'm part of the pretty valued, I think, member of the community. And I'm also here because I'm willing to put, I think, the will and the good of the people above party lines. I don't come here, I didn't come up through the political ranks. I don't have, to a certain extent, any of those allegiances behind me. I'm here to work for not just all of you, but the people out in the district. And I think ultimately, I can empathize. I understand why people voted for Trump. I understand why people voted for Bernie. And I think if we can't understand that, if we can't relate to that, then I don't think any of us are viable.
Tracy?
Thank you. In various other venues, we've often gotten into conversations about the organization, tactics, and strategy of how we would win. I'm going to try to keep it at a slightly higher level because of the 1-minute rule. Right now, rather than waiting for day one to go against Reed, if he were to walk in this door right now, I would take great pleasure in going toe-to-toe with him. I don't mean to be immodest, but I have a doctorate in American history, and I have a law degree, and I do believe that in a debate with him, it would be a pleasure to begin to show the thinness of that man's lies, his forgetting where he comes from, and his lack of concern for this district. I think the main thing we need to do is unite all of these people here. It would be great if we took the strength of all of the candidates and the strength of all of our counties and the strength of all of you here, along with the independents and along with maybe 5% of the Republicans in this district, and I know we can do it.
Andy?
So the question was, how do we actually beat Tom Reed? And, you know, unfortunately, and I do have to disagree with you, I think we can beat him. And I think this, and how we do it is the wave that you're seeing across the country now, and what every other candidate has not done and what Tom Reed himself hasn't done, which is go to every door, meet with your neighbors, talk to people, have those front porch conversations, have those kitchen conversations. That's not something that we've done. That's not something that Tom Reed has done. He's done it just by the virtue of being a Republican and getting people out. But I'm committed to going door to door. I'm committed to meeting people where they're at. I'm committing to energizing people to go meet your neighbors. Talk to one another. That's how we win. That's how we get people to the polls, and that's how we change this district around.
Karl?
Well, when I woke up on November 9th, I was horrified, okay? I was snarling. I'm telling you right now, I was really snarling. I was very upset and depressed. So then I said, you know, it's time for me to get out there and make a difference. Donald J. Trump, for me, and his bigotry and his misogyny and his xenophobia, and it goes on and on and on. I am disgusted, folks. I'm disgusted. And I want you all to know that, and I think that Tom Reed is attached right at the hip with this guy. And it is time for us to fight back. That's why I'm running. I mean, I don't have all the money in the world, nor the name recognition, but I knew I had to do something, and I'm ready to do it, and that's the way I think we're going to beat Tom Reed.
Charles?
So in my opening, I mentioned that what will win this district is uniting the district. And I also said that uniting the district requires someone who will stand up consistently for working people, retirees, and their families. Unfortunately, in both parties in Washington, we have far too few people who do that on a consistent basis. As I was ending my earlier remarks, I was saying that my background resonates with people, and my experience demonstrates that I have spent decades of my life finding practical ways to solve problems in upstate New York and around the country. Voters also are responding, I think, to my message of advancing our common interests, because I think people realize the only way forward as a region and a nation is to advance our common interests. Now, I don't go into this race naively. In 1992, I volunteered for a campaign with Doug Karl, whose district was very similar to this one, against a formidable opponent. I'll tell you more about that later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Kay. Just a procedural question. In the emails, there was going to be the potential for 30-second rebuttals. Is that happening or that's not happening?
We can do it, and we'll see how it does. The only concern I have is there are a large number of you, and we want to get as many questions in.
People want to hear 30-second rebuttals, or should we just nix that idea? Nix it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
You have been heard.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to start with Rick. And the question here is, do you believe that health care is a right? What's the best way to keep Americans healthy?
So I already referenced my younger daughter, Megan, and I definitely think healthcare is a right, and I am a firm believer in the good of the whole is the good of all, and I think that by having a single payer or a Medicare for all system or some system where you don't have to worry about packing your kids a lunch or buying their lunch or taking them to the dentist or to get their ear infection checked out for antibiotic, I think we need a system for that. My older daughter, who I have not talked about, has got a PhD in public health, and we talk about this often, and I think part of the issue is the pharmaceutical industry, and that's the biggest impediment because they have so much money that we have to find a way to publicly finance the pharmacies as well.
To the life loop, oh, I'm next.
Ian?
Yeah, so I believe that it's a right. I've lobbied for the New York Health Act in Albany with some of you that are here tonight. I'll continue to work toward a Medicare for all system. I think it's the way that we need to go with the rest of the developed world. But I think we also need to take ownership for our own health. I mean, there are a lot of factors working in against people. There are food deserts. There are economic inequalities when it comes to health. I mean, they are systemic problems that we need to address as communities and legislators. But there are also entities here. Our Cayuga Medical Center is doing a great job of making preventative medicine and health part of what they're doing, and I think it's being very effective. So we also need to take ownership of our own health, make healthy decisions, sort out some of the other pieces that come at us, and also, again, take ownership. So, but I believe that it's a right.
Tracy?
Thank you. I too believe it is a right. Of course, we live in a society where our Bill of Rights is really a set of negative rights, what government cannot do to you. But I do believe it's fully within the opportunity of Congress to begin to push for positive rights. And one way that we could begin to do that, for example, is have the United States sign the 1948 Declaration of Human Rights. And together with health care, we could also have privacy and education as a right for the people in this country. And as a congressperson, I would be very eager to be a leader in that movement. I have had experience in healthcare with Medicaid for my brother, Medicare for a catastrophic illness for my mother, and my own illnesses through HMOs. It is clear to me we need healthcare for every person in this district and as a representative of Congress for the entire country. Thank you.
So I actually echo a lot of what my colleagues said. Yes, healthcare is a right, and I would proudly vote for a Medicare for all solution in this country. I think it's so important that we have that. But let's not forget our current representative has actually, voted to take away healthcare from 68,000 people in this district. 68,000 people. The one thing that we're not talking about, and what my colleagues have also not talked about, is the fact that we lack quality hospitals in rural districts. We lack quality doctors in rural districts. And you know what? That's what we need to focus on. Not only providing health care for everyone, but making sure that our rural communities have access to quality facilities, access to clinics for women's health. You go to places like Olean. If you're a veteran and you live in Olean, you got to drive 2 hours one way or the other just to get to a veterans hospital. Imagine if you're just an average citizen trying to get to your primary person. No Uber, no transportation, none of the like. We've got to expand that access, and we do that by first providing health care for everyone and then fixing our rural issues.
Karl?
As I said before, I am a strong advocate of a universal health care system. It is a right, it is not a privilege. My family, both my mom and dad are both from the United Kingdom, as well as my older brother and sister. And my sister actually moved back because of some health problems that she was starting to have. And so she's getting first-class medical attention. We need, in this country, to begin to think about ways that we can provide the best possible health care, as Eddie had mentioned. Whether we're thinking of course, defunding Planned Parenthood, which is a terrible idea. Or just yesterday we heard that they want to actually add the individual mandate and torpedo Obamacare and the ACA. It is unbelievable. 13,000, 68,000, so on and so forth. We are the party of universal health care and it being a right. Thank you.
Charles?
Yes, indeed. I believe health care for all. It's very important in the United States. And there are a number of constructive ways that we can get there, and there have been a number of pieces of legislation put forward, but none of them have come from our representative, Tom Reed. Instead, after 7 years, what he and his party have tried to do, and they couldn't even get it through the Senate, is to vote for an ACA repeal that would destabilize the system and cause higher premiums for everyone else and give tax cuts to the rich. And that's one reason why I got into this race. I said, if they're going to do this to the health care bill, and we know that they're trying to get health care off the table to get to tax reform, God help us when we get to tax reform. That's one of the reasons I got into this race. The number one reason why people go into bankruptcy today is because of a health care problem. 1/3 of the people, of the children in this district, 1/3 of the children in this district are on CHIP, which has not been reauthorized. And one of the reasons, because one of the proposals that's been offered by the Republicans is to take money to fund it from preventive care. These things are absurd and they need to stop.
Okay, we're going to start with Ian this time.
Max still gets turned.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I got myself all twisted around.
Universal health care is absolutely a right, not a privilege. We have 31 industrial countries around the world that have figured it out, and they do it at less than half the proportion of the gross domestic product. And we are spending almost $10,000 per man, woman, child in the country, and yet we don't have universal health care. If we did, we could stay healthier, and it would be better for our workforce, better for quality of life. It would also result in, things like hypertension and diabetes. If we can medicate those and keep them from becoming emergent conditions, people stay healthier, and we are a stronger, better country because of it. What is being done by the Republicans is cruel, and it shows a lack of respect for the people who sent them to Congress. Congress is dysfunctional, and we need to pass a universal health care. Thank you very much.
Okay, sorry. I sometimes get confused. Okay, we're going to start with Ian this time with a new question. Today, the House passed tax reform. What would your vote have been, and why would you have voted that way?
Yeah, I'm going to say I would have voted no on that. I think it's a large bait and switch. It's used to justify a much larger issue, which is the budget plan that was put forth and passed some time ago. I think the honest truth, I think some of what Representative Reed is putting out there, I think it's legit. I think he's having us focus on some of the pieces that may be beneficial and having us not ignore the much larger issue. For a while there, the deductions were all the talk. 22% of our district claims the deductions. I think there's a lot more households that would benefit from the standard deduction. But what it's going to do is it's going to reinforce a policy that is going to end up basically bankrupting state and local economies. It's going to drive up property taxes in the form of the Medicaid and Medicare cuts, and it's just going to be a wall of hurt coming to the same people who may receive some of the initial benefits. So I think it's a big bait and switch sold by a snake oil salesman. So I would vote no.
Tracy?
Yes, thank you. I recall using bait and switch also to describe what's going on with this tax proposal. It's also a bit of a Trojan horse in a number of ways. There is the Trojan horse of the 1%, where they claim it's going to give tax relief for working and middle-class people, but that's only on a very temporary basis. By 2025, it evaporates, and guess who gets the big so-called permanent benefits? The 1%. The 1% that has already, since the 1980s, acquired 40% of this nation's wealth. That may be their definition of the United States, but it's not mine, and I bet it's not yours. It's time to reappropriate how tax is done so that we have true relief and enduring for working and middle-class people, and no longer giving that large margin for the 1%. And by the way, there are other little Trojan horses going on here too. There's a little cute pro-life aspect that some Republicans are sneaking in. There's the devastation of the ACA by eliminating the mandatory. And of course, there is that 1-point-something trillion debt we will be passing on to our children. Not on my watch. Thank you.
Eddie?
You know, unfortunately, I don't think it was a bait and switch. I think everything was pretty much out in the open, and Tom Reed was very clear on his stance. You know, he was going to vote to essentially, keep the tax cuts for the wealthiest and, burden the middle class. Then that's what we've got. We've got a representative that basically passed a tax bill that made the wealthiest get wealthier and made our poor suffer. And that's simply unacceptable. So you asked what I would vote. My response would be no, 100%. I don't think there's any, most everyone agrees that we need some type of tax reform, but it shouldn't be at the detriment of our middle class. We need to build a 21st century economy. We need to rebuild the 23rd Congressional District itself. And I think when Tom Reed says that, hey, we're one of the poorest districts out there, he's really just passing bills to keep us poor. And that's completely unacceptable.
Eddie? I'm sorry, Karl?
Oh, yes. I would vote no, absolutely. I'm disgusted to think that we're going to be, cutting taxes once again for millionaires and billionaires and corporations, 15%. And these are all permanent tax cuts. And getting rid of all the deductions, a lot of the deductions that we enjoy as middle-class folks. I just think that we need a tax policy that is really geared towards the middle class, that helps the middle class grow so we can build quality jobs, and we can spend our money in order to help small businesses grow, just like right here in Ithaca. Too much of our money is spent on subsidizing the ultra-rich in this country, and I think it needs to stop. And I would vote no, and I would vote against Tom Reed's position.
Charles?
The GOP promised that tax reform would target the middle class. What we didn't realize is that he meant that we would take a hit so that they could reward their wealthy donors. But that's what's happened. Of course I would vote no. Large corporations and the rich get a huge handout. We get left holding the bag. It enables tax cuts for the 1% by ending deductions for teachers, veterans, university students, universities, and people with medical conditions. I had an email from a friend of mine just before I came here tonight. His wife has MS. It could be any one of us tomorrow. He said, if this goes through, I am toast. It scales back state and local tax deductions, which means that some 23rd district people are going to see tax increases next year. But even without that, over the course of this time, because they take away deductions that they give us in the near term, we'll pay more. Now, they say that, we'll talk later.
Max?
So much to say.
There is a lot to say. I would have voted no, no doubt. But when we did give a tax cut of 35 to 20% to corporations as a reward, I guess, for offshoring our jobs, that's not a 15% reduction. That's a 43% reduction. And it's permanent, folks. The things that are given or doled out to the middle class are things that will sunset, as people have said. So trickle-down economics does not work, and it hasn't worked in Kansas, and it hasn't worked when they tried it before. They bring it out every 10 years or so. It doesn't work. What works is providing tax relief to small businesses and the middle class, because they will spend the money. And when they spend the money, it's income to others. And when they spend the money, it's income to others. It's called the multiplier effect. That's the way we get an economy moving. That's where we get economic activity, and that's what we need. Thank you.
Rick?
Thank you. Obviously, as you guys have heard, our views are very, very similar, and I would have voted no. And I think the question we have to ask is, obviously, we need some kind of a reform of the tax system. I mean, any of you guys that fill out your taxes in April, or business owners that do it quarterly, we have an issue with the tax system. We need to fix it. We have to fix it. This is the wrong way to fix it. One has to wonder why the Republican Congress people that voted against it. Many of whom, probably half of whom, were in New York State. So that's a question we need to ask ourselves. Why are the GOP people voting against the program as well? But we do need something. We have to have something to give people like all of us, the teachers, the laborers, the people who spend all the money down the street, like Max says. We need a break. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start with another question, and it'll be for Tracy. What do you believe could be done at the federal level to reduce gun violence in the U.S.?
Well, we must do something, because a stable society does not have people using firearms to kill scores and scores and scores of people as we all sit and watch the horror. This cannot be normalized. I appreciate that there is a Second Amendment. I understand the Supreme Court's interpretation of it. There are a lot of other rights in the Constitution, and they are all reasonably balanced: speech, search and seizure. We have to reasonably balance gun rights. I would recommend as a suggestion that we think of what we do with cars and drivers. We register cars and we permit drivers, licensure. I think that might begin to be a model that we can begin to talk about to bring some sense to what is otherwise a national crisis.
Eddie?
The first thing I would say is, how many senseless acts of violence is it going to take for our elected representatives to actually do something? That's first and foremost. You know, I believe that you should be able to own a gun, but your gun ownership should be safe and it should be responsible. And I think the majority of the people in the southern tier are like that. They're safe, they're responsible. But I don't think anyone disagrees. We need to stop getting guns into the hands of wrong people. And the majority of folks agree that that's by doing background checks. That's by getting out there and ensuring that we're not giving them to the people that are going to use that for senseless violence. But more importantly, when we look at some of these attacks that have happened, when we look at some of these senseless gun violence, it's because those folks got those guns legally. And there was no other stop that Congress or federal law has done to allow them to do that. And that's what we need. We need someone to actually stand up to it, recognize that, yes, you have a Second Amendment right for gun ownership, but we got to make sure it's safe, we got to make sure it's responsible, and that's how we stop this senseless violence.
Karl?
I agree with all these guys. Every day we see a new mass shooting, a mass murder. It's deplorable. And the very fact that we've got bump stocks, we've got assault weapons, we've got guns that are able to mass shoot and mass kill, is just doesn't happen in other places. And quite frankly, the violence, the gun violence in many countries. I've been to many countries, many countries as a pastor. It just doesn't happen in most of the developed world, largely because of the issue of access and the issue of prohibitions against certain types of guns, which are made for the military, not for individual use. I believe in the Second Amendment, but this has gone way too far.
Charles?
When I became a member of the Congressional Budget Office, I agreed to an oath, which is the same oath that members of Congress take, which is to support and defend the Constitution. That includes the Second Amendment. But let's remember why we have a Constitution, to secure our liberties, right, and protect the common welfare. That can't happen if you can't go to church and have to, or an event like this, and have the fear that someone could come in and shoot all of us. So we have to do practical things, sensible things. Where's the action on bump stocks? Nothing's happened on that yet. Thompson-King. Thompson is a Democrat, King is a Republican from New York. They have legislation which would enhance background checks. Why hasn't that been going anywhere? They've introduced it time and time again. Gabriella Giffords just put together something that is on my website. You can find it, there's a link to it on my website. 9 legal things that circumvent the laws, on gun laws, that we can do now to prevent the next mass gun shooting. So take a look at that. Also, in the past, I've done things with, I can't go on, sorry. Can't go on.
Max?
Gun violence has got to stop. I support the Second Amendment as part of the Constitution, but there are common sense things that we should and could and must do. National background checks are not being done, and there's a 22% of the guns that are purchased are done at gun shows. So that's a loophole that should be closed. It should be a national background check, because I'm not so concerned about a guy hunting with a rifle or defending his house. But there are bad guys out there, and when I say terrorists, I'm not talking about someone from another country even. People that want to do bad things to a lot of people at once. If they can get guns without us knowing, without our police knowing, and without being able to track that, they put the public at risk. Bump stocks should be outlawed. We need to do common sense things, and we can talk about it later.
Rick?
So the Second Amendment was not written to address what's going on right now. In those days, the whole idea of the Second Amendment was to basically defend ourselves against the redcoats. I think, unfortunately, the cat may be out of the bag. That we have so many weapons, so many places. I kind of like where Tracy went with the registration and the car end of things, where you have to not only take a test to get your driver's license, but you have to register your car every year, or every other year, depending on where you live, what state. And you have to get it inspected. The problem is getting all those things back. I mean, the toothpaste is out of the tube. So now what we have to do is we have to have the background checks. It has to be encompassing mental health issues. It has to be encompassing past criminal things, and it has to be national. So it's going to be a very, very difficult situation. But I think that we need to address a way to do that, because it's ridiculous. Everybody says how bad it is in Congress. We're going to have to wait for a cooling down period. Unfortunately, after that cooling down period, we have another event. So nothing's been done.
Ian?
Indeed, with more deaths related to guns since I think 1968 than all wars in history of the U.S., I think combined, we're long past it being a crisis issue. For those who haven't spent a ton of time out in the district, we can tell you as candidates that one of the most frequent signs that you'll see is repeal the SAFE Act, and that's something us as congressional candidates really have to reconcile. And we also have to start by doing something about it. And so what I'd like to do in the next couple months, if anybody would like to be a part of it, let me know, is to bring together a forum on guns. I'd like to bring together a couple friends who are legal gun owners, bring together a couple people who really would like to see guns go away, and let's have that dialogue. We can reinforce, I think, indeed, the regulations that are in place, but without having an authentic dialogue, if we continue to just legislate from Capitol Hill or Albany on what gun regulation should look like without bringing legal gun owners to the table, then we're not going to get anywhere. So that's something I'd like to do and invite any of you to join in the process.
Okay, we're going to have a different question, and we'll start with Eddie. Climate change is one of the greatest threats facing our nation. With Congress not taking this seriously, What will you do to bring it to the table? And what are your actions that you'll take to counter this devastation?
Well, thank you for that question. First and foremost, I would like to state for the record, I do like to breathe, so I think climate change is real, right? You know, one of the biggest things that we've noticed is that our current administration doesn't believe that, you know, that our climate is actually having a problem. You know, we have global warming for a reason. You know, we are treating our environment poorly, and we need to recognize that. More importantly, though, from my perspective, we need to make sure that we have strong regulations, for example, like the EPA, agencies that are able to regulate those things. Because I'll tell you what, this district is an incredible place to live, raise a family, grow up, and we want to keep that for our children. And the way it is right now, I don't think that's going to be. So we need to start to enact regulations that do preserve our district and as well as the entire country.
Karl?
Well, first of all, we have to get back to the Paris Peace Accord. We've got to get back to the table. We will not have a table. Neighbors having, solar on their roof was unimaginable some 30 years ago. We need to continue the hard work of bringing us back to the world and bringing us back to the Accord in Paris, and also just continuing to fight each and every day against the fossil fuel industries, which are making us so dependent on that particular resource.
Charles?
Well, I think what we need to do is develop a national strategy, and that will have two benefits. It will address this issue, and it will also revitalize our economy, and especially in places where we need jobs, maybe like as in upstate New York. So if we can't come up with a list for what to do with a national strategy, I think we should just take the list that they use in China and in Europe. For example, we know that China wants to be at the leader of electric cars, of wind energy, and of solar, right? We actually gave them the starting point for much of that technology through technology transfer. But now they're taking it and running with it, and we're not. So I think we need to do those sorts of things. We need to be a leader in renewables. We need to be a leader in the technologies of the future. We have fabulous universities. Somebody asked me when I was going around the district at one point, what are some of our strengths? Our universities are one of our strengths, not just in the east part of the district, but throughout the district. We need to build on that strength and be a leader for the rest of the world.
Max?
Climate change is real. Global warming is a problem. And I think as you watch the executive branch putting in people who are dismantling our regulations, it's something that people in Congress need to counterbalance. There are military people who are very consciously fighting against that. They recognize the risks of all littoral combat. There are issues about our national safety. So we have to be, it's hard to be a leader in innovation of clean energy when you're not even at the table. You're not a leader if you're not in the Accords. It seems to me we've got to get back to the Paris Accords, and we need to be a part of the new world, not allowing people to put more slag and soot in rivers because it's going to make us more competitive in coal in the future. I don't think so.
Climate change obviously is real. I'll go back to my daughter again. Environmental science major, hardcore Greenpeace activist. There are other alternative fuels and alternative energies that haven't been talked about yet. We have a gasification process that's used in other parts of the world that takes basically household rubbish and waste, and it turns into clean energy. and it does it without any byproduct of waste. We need to look, and we need people that know what they're doing, some of whom live very close to us right now, and some of whom are involved with the universities we talked about. We need people that know what they're doing to be listened to, not to be pushed aside, to listen to these people, take what they know, take their processes, and we need to step out on a limb and get rid of fossil fuels.
So 50,000 jobs added to our economy last year in the solar industry alone. I think that accounts for more electricity sector jobs than all fossil fuel sectors combined. It's pretty amazing, and the market's catching up. Our current representative have voted twice in 2 resolutions to reduce the, I believe the subsidies coming back are offsets for renewables. We need to change that while we're in office. But we also need to relate to what the energy sector means for entities out in our district and communities. Again, some of our largest employers are related to the fossil fuel industry. You know, that's second generation jobs, and the only thing that people have to put food on their table. Unless we can come in and develop ideas, strategies, and provide the funding to turn those entities around, to retrain those workers, to retrofit those facilities, it's tough to tell somebody to forego being able to feed their family without it. So we need to be able to relate to those in the district. We need to be able to move forward from there.
Okay.
When I was on the town planning board here in Ithaca, we always had as part of our reviews something called an environmental review. I think that this is a very good idea for how we can begin to reconceive politics in this district. If we could take the natural beauty that we have, the natural resources, the bounty of it, and be sure that we are preserving it for generations to come, but also building upon that the economics, the tourism, the use of 21st century renewables, all of these ideas that have been mentioned can be stacked together in a way that we can see it comprehensively instead of one plan here and one plan there. I also think, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we must deconstruct the people who don't want us to be taking this kind of proactive, futuristic, constructive view of how we're going to manage the future of our district. Only when we understand their politics will we be able to formulate ours.
Okay, Karl, we'll start with you. A new question.
Is it Karl?
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's you. This is me?
Karl.
I'm Karl, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
The question is, do you support a woman's right to choose, including abortion?
Yes, as a Presbyterian minister, many people have asked me this very question. Do you support a woman's right to choose, including abortion? I absolutely do. I think a woman's body is a woman's body, and I think that she should have the right to conduct her health care needs for her particular needs. No one has the right to take that away from her. And so, yes, I would support that, and I would support maintaining many of our facilities just like Planned Parenthood. We do not need to start cutting away from Planned Parenthood and other such organizations. State after state after state, especially Texas, are making it almost impossible, 300 miles to get to the next Planned Parenthood facility, and it's just unacceptable. I think we need to be able to give women safe places to go and not have to feel also intimidated if they wish to choose that particular avenue in their life.
Absolutely. I'm sorry, not my turn? I'm sorry, Karl. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, well, this
I'm
is
sorry,
Charles.
Charlie. I forgot about Charlie. So sorry.
It's okay. My wife forgets me. Actually, she's fabulous. She's in the back. Linda, I love you very much. So, yes, the answer to the question is yes, absolutely. It's a matter of choice, and it's a matter of a woman's right. It's interesting. There are so many pieces of legislation that the Republicans have put forward, and there are so many press releases that have come out of Tom Reed's office that have the word freedom and choice in them, but not on this issue. That's all that I need to say is yes.
Now we can hear you, Max.
So sorry. Absolutely. I think it begins with respecting women and women's rights. I think it should be safe, legal, and rare. And not rare because we intimidate people who want to have that procedure or shoot the people who are providing it or closing the clinics that would provide it. It should be rare because we provide education, contraceptives, and we don't, and it's going the wrong way. They're trying to eliminate all those options, particularly for the poor. They withdraw funding for Planned Parenthood. Our representative couldn't wait to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. It's cruel, it's inappropriate, it shows a disrespect and an indifference to women, and it's wrong. Thank you.
Rick? Please, no clapping. Thank you.
Again, I support a woman's right to choose whatever she deems best for her body or her lifestyle. I think it goes back to another issue as well, and we talked about it before a little bit with the rights of individuals. We need to have the right to love whomever we want, to marry whomever we want, to decide what we need to do with our own bodies, to worship however or whomever we want. And I think this is just another opportunity for people that look like me to get involved in other people's lives that don't look like me. And I think that's unrealistic for us to come from that standpoint. Unrealistic is a bad way of putting it. It's just not right. We shouldn't have a bunch of people in suits and ties and guys with beards or gray hair deciding what women should be able to do with their bodies, or what people should be able to, who people should be able to love or marry, or gender they choose. It all comes down to the same thing: is that everybody has to have the right to control their own self in that regard.
Okay, Ian?
Yes, I support a women's right to choose.
I was thinking of doing the same. I made that clear in my opening statements, but I'm playing in my mind with this word choose, because I'm thinking of the children. My partner, Vicki Everett, is a kindergarten teacher in Watkins Glen, and she frequently tells me about the children that are there. And yes, I absolutely believe in a woman's right to choose. But when I think about the stories that she tells me of children who have never been to a dentist, and they come in with these abscesses and then the infections, the children who come in hungry, the children who come in so unsupported, I think we need to think very hard about what we mean by choice. And I don't mean in terms of reproductive health, but what choices in life do people have living in such poverty? What choices do people without any social services have to be able to provide for their children and make sure that they have choices in life to grow and to develop in a way that should be essential for all Americans? Let's think more about that word choice. Let's not just not limit it to women's reproductive health. Thank you.
Eddie?
So women deserve the opportunity, the women deserve the autonomy to make healthcare decisions for themselves. It's plain and simple. We shouldn't be dictating it. But more importantly, we need to expand access to clinics and women's health clinics in rural areas. It's a problem. You know, women that are in urban areas have much different access than women in rural areas. And I'll tell you what, I don't believe that there should be any government interference with a woman trying to determine her own health care decisions.
Karl?
Oh, I think I answered the question on the.
Oh, I'm
yeah.
sorry.
That's
Yes.
all right. I can say it again. I'm definitely pro-choice.
I got
Pro-choice.
distracted. Okay. Charles, and I'm sorry about the back. I will speak up louder. Can you hear me now? Okay. No? Now? Okay. Okay, this is the first question for Charles. How do you feel you'll connect with veterans, and gun owners in the 23rd District?
So, my dad was a Marine, And when I came to the university, I thought about signing up for ROTC. In fact, I did sign up originally for ROTC, and I went through a couple of years in ROTC. And then my dad and I had a chat, and he sat me down, and he said, you know, I know what you want to do. At the time, I wanted to be a lawyer, because I thought that was the way to affect the lives of working people. He said, you know, you don't have to go through right now. He said, there are many ways to serve. And he said, after you go to law school, if you then choose to serve, that will be fine. And then I went a different way. So there are many different ways to serve. But I certainly appreciate that other way of serving that my dad did, that my wife's brother, cousins, and many members of my own family and my wife's family have done. You know, but I think that the way that we connect is we show respect for their service by health care benefits, by even the tax cut today. There were parts of the tax cut today that take away affordable education, job opportunities, and housing for veterans. That's just not right.
Max?
Obviously, with 32 years, 10 months and 3 days serving in the Air Force Academy, I am a veteran. I'm a life member of the Veterans for Foreign Wars. I'm a member of the American Legion, the Reserve Officers Association. Veterans and veterans' rights and needs are very much a part of who I am and why I do what I do and why I'm choosing to run. I think the people in the hinterlands, in the middle of our district, do have strong opinions about service and guns, and I think that I can relate to them in a very personal way, not in a threatening way, but in a way that includes them, and when they hear me say, I'm not going to take your guns, I'm here to do something in Washington, to make things happen for you. And I think there's too much polarization and too much toxic things going on. Nobody's talking to anybody else.
Rick?
They need to.
So I think that we need our veterans to understand that we are going to not send, before they become veterans, we're not going to send them into some place where they shouldn't be to begin with in places of war. We need to make sure they understand that when they come out of those or come out of their service to their country, that we're going to take care of them with health care. We're going to take care of them with education. We're going to take care of them with retirement. We're going to take care of them with counseling. We're going to take care of them with everything that they need to be productive citizens, no matter how long or how old they are. And once they understand that we're going to fight for all of those things, and we're going to fight for those things for those people who are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice to not only the good of the whole again, but to our entire country and our way of life, I think then we will get them on board with all of us.
Ian?
I honestly don't think that I could have said it better than Rick just did, so I'm going to say I agree with Rick.
I do,
Tracy?
and I do too. I was just saying to him behind that, I think that was exactly right. My father was a veteran, the Second World War. He was in the major invasions in the Pacific, Tinian, Saipan, Okinawa. He earned a Bronze Star for saving some Marines on an island called Iwo Jima. And his 4 other brothers were in the war all at the same time. It was kind of the Italian version of Saving Private Ryan, although thank God all 5 boys came home. I really think that in order for us to do everything that Rick said, it began with what he said. We have to connect foreign policy to what we think about our veterans and be sure that when we take an action, we really are doing it with the unity of the country behind us and not for some other interests such as oil or whatever other kinds of interests might compel us into those kinds of incursions. If we can connect our foreign policy, we can also do what we need to do for our veterans.
Eddie?
You know, our veterans gave their lives for us, and that is an incredible sacrifice. You know, their families also gave up so much. But I'll tell you what, we do a bad job of taking care of those veterans when they come back. We do a horrible job of it. We don't provide them enough access to health care. We don't help them get jobs when they come back. We're not helping them deal with depression from coming up overseas. That's what we need. There are so many veterans in this district. You go across the district, you meet people, you thank them for their service, but you want to get them help, and you realize that we're missing that help. We're missing being able to get them what they need, a good paying job and health care that they gave up their life so that we could have ours.
Karl?
As a social worker, I work with a lot of veterans every day, and one of the things that's very, very convoluted, the whole system is convoluted and complicated. The whole system of connection, if you've ever heard that word ever spoken or uttered, it is so convoluted and so subjective on how they determine what veteran is connected and how they're connected. It's absurd how it goes. And some people who have, gosh, they've been veterans their whole life, and they find that their connection is not quite what it should be, or it's not exactly connected to a point in time of service. I would like to end the whole connection system and give our veterans 100% what they deserve, 100% health care, 100%. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to start a new question with Max. Question is, we've seen a number of anti-disability legislation introduced in the House, including a piece of legislation that would gut Americans with Disability Act. What would you do if elected to protect the rights of Americans with disabilities?
There is so much that disabled people can do and should do, and we should encourage them to be full participants in whatever they're capable of doing. So I reject any going back from where we are with the American Disability Act. I'm totally against that, and I will support the folks all the way. I think it's wrong, but it's not a surprise to me that there is an effort to do that, and it's sad.
Rick?
Well, it kind of goes back to what I said about Dakota before at the very beginning. Dakota, who took advantage of so many services, whether it be special education, whether it be social workers in schools, whether it be nurses, whether it be rehab offered through OT or PT because of whatever reason. That getting rid of ADA or reducing ADA, I can't believe that they would actually get rid of it, but reducing the reach of ADA is just another one of those attempts to kind of make sure that unless you look like me, we're going to screw with you. And that's the biggest issue right there. We need to give everyone an opportunity to turn into the best they can be and not pigeonhole monies for normal people. And I put normal in quotes because Vicki and I are looking at each other, and we deal with kids every day, all day. And so we know there is no such thing.
Ian?
My first career was as an occupational therapist. I was the first class through here at Ithaca College, and I spent 6 years that career really working with an interdisciplinary team approach to do all that I could to assist people in returning to independence following disability. The assault on in many forms, civil rights, but including disabilities through the schools in our society at the moment. I think it's really bad. I mean, I've been there with families trying to figure those pieces of the puzzle out. I've seen the students in the schools who for sure get a short end of the stick in terms of their education, and I'll do all I can to reinforce the legislation as well as the families that are really trying to make that work.
I'd like to take a little bit of my time to recognize people in the audience who work in this area, and they have tirelessly given their lives to helping people with disabilities. Anne Marie Madison is in the front row. She works with children on the spectrum at the Recker Center, and I know there are people watching who are also involved very much in this kind of work. In my activities in higher education, I was quite involved in the development of internet or information technology policy, and one of the principal policies that we always wanted to forward was accessibility policy. And this policy would simply establish the standards of how websites are made so people with a variety of disabilities could be able to access the information just as people who do not have disabilities with regard to sight, hearing, or motor activities. This administration has stopped the regulatory effort to make that consistent throughout the United States in all of education. I would do everything in my power to turn that back on.
Eddie?
Thank you. So you asked specifically about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I'll tell you what, it was an act that provided access for folks that were disabled or needed support across buildings and different facilities and services across our nation. You know, I actually worked a small stint for the New York State Division of Human Rights, and I saw a lot of discrimination firsthand in regards to this. New York has somewhat of a progressive policy, but federally, we've not gotten there yet. And I'll tell you what, my goal would be to improve the Americans with Disabilities Act by expanding it. There's a need now for assistive technologies. There's a huge need for increasing the ability to access buildings, the ability to get to what we need to be. We need to expand it, we need to make it better, and we need to recognize that technology can help us, and let's start to implement it for our people here.
Karl?
I actually have a stepson who is autistic on the spectrum, and he benefits greatly from the ADA. He attends BOCES, which is a business ventures program, and whether it's access to buildings, as a social worker, I work with folks who need ramps and lift chairs and a whole myriad of things that are crucial for having a productive life and having an enjoyable life to increase their quality of life. Let's not be against people here, folks. The disabled members of our society are so incredibly important and huge contributors to what makes us the greatest country in the world. Let's not do things that would mitigate or negate that possibility and those possibilities for them. That is absurd. I would support expanding the ADA. Thank you, Eddie. That's a very good point.
Charles?
Well, let me just mention 3 areas that I think are relevant. First of all, with respect to employment. Early in the year, there were a number of rules and regulations that were unwritten by the new Congress and signed by the President. Some of them had to do with protecting folks with disabilities. So we need to revisit all of that. In the area of education, today in the tax bill, part of that included a tax on universities that have large endowments. That includes Gallaudet University. That's just not right. And then, I mentioned to you before, the issue of health care. My friend who emailed me tonight and said, I'm toast if this passes. We're all toast because that condition that his wife has could be something we wake up and have tomorrow. So this is not about helping somebody else. This is about helping all of us as Americans to be as good, as great as we can.
Okay, Rick, we're going to start with you. New question. Do you support ending the FICA cap on taxable income for Social Security and Medicare?
Was that to eliminate the cap?
Yes. End it.
So that's another example of the people with all the money trying to take all the money from the people that don't have as much money as they do. So the Social Security, which in purpose and in theory was to provide for people in their old age that didn't have another means of retirement. Obviously that's changed with now. That's a whole other tax, Roths and tax annuities and things like that, and change the taxes on that. So I would definitely support raising the cap, if not eliminating it altogether, so that we didn't have to pay any taxes on Social Security wages.
Ian?
Yeah, I believe part of that issue is entities that would like us to take the eye off the ball and believe that Social Security is in jeopardy. Social Security is doing okay. It has its own dedicated tax, and there's nothing to prevent the federal government from dedicating any amount of money that's needed to the Social Security program. With that said, yes, I would be in favor of lifting the tax cap, if not to 250,000, well above, and let it go.
Yes, I would lift the tax cap also, and I want to underscore what I think are persistent threats for any large amounts of money that private interests see in government coffers. It's very important, I believe, that we have to maintain support of government programs in government hands and not turn those funds, Social Security in particular, over to private interests. Thank you.
Eddie?
So I would echo with my colleagues and also say that, yes, I would raise the cap on with Social Security, if not eliminate it. You know, what we're looking here is the fact that we also have Congress that continues to borrow from Social Security. You know, if we are raising that cap or eliminating that cap, we will now be able to continue to fund Social Security. But more importantly, we got to figure out where that money has been going that they've been borrowing from Social Security.
Karl?
Yes, I would. Oh, this is a passionate topic of mine. I know that 100% of my income, 100% of my income is taxable for Social Security. What about you? 100% of your income. Why shouldn't that be for every single man, woman, and child, billionaires or millionaires? It is absurd. We could fix the Social Security issue overnight if we just have the millionaires and billionaires pay their fair share. Because, you know, you never know. They may not, you know, one day they'll wake up and they may not have all those billions, and they're going to need Social Security. So, you know what I'm saying? So that's where I stand on it, absolutely.
Charles?
Yes, I would agree with everyone here as well. Raise the cap. I've mentioned that to folks in other meetings, other settings. You know, when George W. Bush got reelected, he said he has political capital, so he wanted to use that to reform Social Security, just like they wanted to reform the tax system today. And he put a panel together, and everybody on the panel wanted one thing. They wanted to carve out a part of Social Security for private investment, private savings accounts. I put together a civic engagement project, drawing on people from all walks of life in upstate and western New York. And we got together, we met monthly, talking about what would we really need to revitalize and to review and to reassess retirement and retirement policy. And that's the way we do things. We do things by bringing everybody together and come up with great ideas. We don't say, oh, let's just cut, Social Security by creating these tax cuts. Thanks.
Max?
I would be in favor of raising the cap or eliminating it, like my other colleagues up here have said. I think it's something to consider because demographics are changing based on the baby boomers. You know, it used to be set up so that there would be 6 people working for one person who's on Social Security, and it's getting closer to 3, and that's a real problem, or it can become a real problem. So it's something to think about. I think the other thing to think about is we have some very strong special interests, pardon me for saying it so often, but the Koch brothers are saying, I'm ready, willing, and able to spend $300 to $400 million in the 2018 congressional election. And what are their priorities? Undermine Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, get rid of anything that looks like universal health care, and reduce the taxes for the top 1%. And what do you think about that? They're doing a pretty good job, aren't they? So watch and be vigilant.
New question, and we'll start with Karl. No, I'm sorry.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. What do you see as the biggest threat to national security?
I'm confused.
What's everybody laughing about back there? You know, I mean, there's a, what's that? There's Donald Trump. I think that there, yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm not sure where to take that at the moment, but I think climate change is definitely a very large, serious issue, which the Department of Defense, Pentagon have even stated. It's got such huge multipliers in terms of the impact. I think another area, I mean, you only asked me for one. I'm saying another area, but I think it's also misinformation at this point. I mean, there's so much misinformation out there feeding in on itself. I think it even impacts that larger issue of climate change. I mean, you could go online and you could plug in whatever you want related to climate change, and if you're a climate change denier, well, you're going to get 10 resources that pop up to validate that thought right there. So, you know, I think that's a very real issue, but I think in this day and age, it's being potentially usurped by that.
I agree with all of those points, but unequivocally, I would identify cyber insecurity as the #1 threat to national security. We do have resources in this area in the United States, but we're playing a game of cat and mouse with other countries and with organized crime, and then, of course, with just people who want to go ahead and do what they want on the internet. There are no laws that make hacking illegal internationally. And technology will never be the answer to cyber insecurity. What we need is international internet governance that works in a treaty fashion, not unlike what we did with nuclear deterrence. So if we ever want to be serious about addressing what I think is our #1 threat, because it could go right to our power grids, it could shut this country down if there were a genuinely deep, successful hack. The only way that we can pursue deterrence is through negotiation and treaty.
So I agree with Tracy in the fact that cybersecurity is a huge threat to our nation's security. However, I'd say a bigger threat right now is actually lack of diplomacy that we have from a lot of our administration and elected officials. You know, we should not be playing war games over Twitter. We should not be playing war games with other countries. What we need to be doing is we need to be on the ground. We need to be working with other countries, our allies, their partners, in order to move these things forward. Our biggest threat to national security right now is probably ourselves more than anything else. Thank you.
Karl?
Well, I'll have to say, I'm going to have to agree with the first answer, which was Donald J. Trump. I will have to agree with that. I feel very strongly that we have an erratic, we have a president who twitters his way to diplomacy. He rattles sabers people like the president of North Korea. He doesn't know what he's doing in this regard. And I would support, I'll be on record here today, I will support articles of impeachment as for this president. I will be probably the only candidate to do so, but I will support articles of impeachment.
So I think that the nuclear threat remains the #1 threat because in a blink of an eye, it's all over, and that we need to recognize. The cyber dimension of it makes the threat all that more great and all that more serious. We need to be adults about it, and unfortunately, all too often, we're not. We have a treaty with Iran. From all I can read, the experts say it was the best thing that we could get, and it wasn't a bad deal, but because it was by a party that people wanted to beat up from the day that Barack Obama came into office, they don't like it. Well, rename it. In fact, they may do that. That's what I've heard that members of the Senate will do, is try to find a way to reframe it as not Obama's, because they don't want it to go away as well. But you know what else is a threat to our national security? Is ignoring the wage stagnation that's gone on for a generation. That's a threat to our national security. We want economic opportunity for our kids. We want them to be able to come back to Western New York, not give tax cuts for people that go out of New York, but not to have tax cuts for kids that want to come back and move here. Thank you.
Max?
there have been a lot of good points made. Cybersecurity is a concern. Diplomacy is a concern. I personally feel less safe when someone who's in the chair makes statements that haven't been thought out, second, third, fourth order consequences of what they say. Not being a student of history or aware of the dynamics between international players, I feel very uncomfortable with someone like that being very close to the nuclear codes. Also, it makes no sense to me to kind of poke the bear with a stick. I mean, if you know someone is not really, I'm talking about the North Koreans. I mean, why would you antagonize someone that you're just not sure if they're all there? Is that a good idea? I don't think so.
No, it is not a good idea.
So, thanks.
Boy, if only it were that easy, just to pick one thing. Unfortunately, in this day and age, everything is so intertwined with the whole process. We're talking cybersecurity, which ties into nuclear war, which ties into diplomacy or lack thereof, which ties into siding with people and believing countries that we may not necessarily want to believe on face value. Those things all go together. And unfortunately, I agree with Max, and I'm 59 years old. In 1958, I was born. I grew up watching the body counts on TV at dinner every night during the Vietnam War. I remember all those things. I'm more concerned about things right now on a global scale than I've ever been in my entire life. And it's going to take all of us pulling on the rope in the same direction at the same time. And it's going to be very, very difficult.
Okay, next question, and we'll start with Tracy.
I think we need closing statements at this point.
45. I'm sorry, I just got the message that we are out of time for questions, and we will, I wish we could go on and on. I love hearing your positions.
We were just getting the hang of it, too.
I know, we were just getting used to the rotating speakers. Okay, so we will start with closing statements, and I'm going to just do the reverse that we did with the opening, so we'll start with Charles.
So thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for asking questions, and a special thanks to our organizers. In my opening, I said I can unite the district by standing up for working people, retirees, and their families. A candidate must also inspire others to do their part, so let me give that a try. Early this year, Republicans quietly rolled back many protections for workers and retirees and made it harder for workers to save for retirement. Our representative had a chance to stand up for working people, but he didn't. That was strike one. In May, House Republicans voted to destroy the Affordable Care Act and destabilize the health care system. That was so extreme that Senate Republicans refused to go along. That was strike two. A few months ago, House Republicans passed the so-called Financial Choice Act. I told you to hear that word a lot. Again, it was so extreme that Senate Republicans refused to touch it. If you manage to save some money for retirement, shouldn't your retirement advisor be required to put your interests ahead of their own? Not under the House bill. That was strike three. Now, House Republicans want to bust the budget to give huge tax cuts to the rich. Workers who need to relocate or want to come back to New York will lose a chance to have moving expenses deducted, but companies moving jobs overseas will keep their deductions and get additional tax breaks. I have a problem with all that, especially the jobs part. My dad and his coworkers lost their jobs and retirement benefits, but not before their company was made them take their jobs and ship them overseas and train their foreign workers. I'll stand up for you every day. I hope you join me. Thank you.
Okay, Karl.
I've only really touched on the surface of what I believe in. I believe in a progressive agenda. I love this great country. I love it passionately. That's why I'm here standing before you today. I preach every Sunday. most Sundays, the social gospel. And I love my neighbor, and I love those people that I wish to take care of and nurture. The great part about being a Democrat, in my view, is that we are a party of us and we. We're not the party of just I and me. And I just feel like the Republican Party has strayed to the greed side of things, to the I, to the me. And I would like to take this opportunity as a candidate running for the 23rd Congressional District to fight for us, to fight for the vulnerable, to fight for those people who cannot help themselves. That's what I'm about. That's what I've always been about. I spent my whole life as a community organizer, as a social worker, 20 years of social work and community organizing, and just creating a base of folks who just want to serve their neighbor and serve those who are the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Eddie?
I first off just want to thank the League of Women Voters and the Reed Sisters for having us all here to be able to speak, and for everyone who actually came and participated and asked questions, and everyone out on the interwebs over here watching us. I wanted to thank you all for being here. The one thing that I wanted to just end with is the fact that in this primary, we've not talked a lot about jobs in this district. We've not talked about the fact that this area is falling behind because we have people that are left here as big manufacturers leave, and we're not doing anything about it. We don't have a representative that's done anything. He's admitted that we are a poor district, that we're out of jobs, and that's not okay. My focus in this election has been about bringing those jobs back, about bringing the 21st century jobs here to this district, but not by just wooing companies to come in, by taking our people, retraining them, and getting them into 21st century jobs. Things like building solar panels and wind farms in this district, being able to focus on energy resources in our district. And that's what we're going to do. That's what I intend to do. So I just wanted to announce the fact that I'm actually going to be announcing a jobs plan to recover this Rust Belt area. I want to make sure that we know that we need to invest in people. We need to build the infrastructure in this district, and we got to propel our district forward. So I'm going to be launching this plan after Thanksgiving because I think it's important that you have a candidate that has a plan forward. And I actually challenge all of my other primary opponents to do the same. Thank you.
Tracy?
Well, you can count me on that. I have long been an advocate, given the work that I do in internet specialties, that the only way that we can move this district forward is if we have connectivity to every farm, every house, every library, and every school. It is simply not possible to create the kind of economic development that Eddie's talking about without the 21st century infrastructure that in other communities has demonstrated a 40% increase in their ability to get jobs, to be more productive, and to reinvigorate a working as well as a middle class. So count me in. When I grew up, I came into politics by doing some labor organizing in the farm workers movement. I was involved in the civil rights movement. I also worked in the anti-apartheid movement. I still very much believe in all of those values. It was also something that I developed intellectually through the education that I had. But I want to tell you that on the Sunday after 9/11, I was at church and we sang the anthem, America the Beautiful, and I had never had the experience where I felt my patriotism. I cried like a baby, and I still believe that this is a land of heart as well as head. In the years since, I have worked in the area of the internet primarily to discuss areas of privacy, not only in the consumer context, but with government surveillance. In all of the campaigning that we have done, no one asks these questions, but please let me share briefly that these are important issues that we must address, and they are federal issues. So whether it's a matter of the regulation we need to get the internet out just like we did electricity and the telephone, or whether it's the kind of thinking we must do in the resetting of our surveillance laws in order to maintain the sense of integrity and autonomy that is essential in a democracy. Thank you, organizers, and thank all of you very much for coming tonight.
Just a little insert before we go in. Correction, the organizers are actually called the Reed-jectors.
I apologize for that mistake.
Your version was good too, though. I mean, that's. So I'm thankful again to so many of you who are not only here tonight, but who have reached out to support any one of us here before you. Each of us may be vying for a win, but we move forward together, and we'll be a formidable team come July. To those in the community who have provided support already to our campaign, I'm grateful. Together, we're moving forward and picking up steam on all needed fronts. We have committed supporters in all counties. At 400, we have 4 times the number of unique donors than the next closest challenger. We've raised 50% more than any other candidate in FEC Quarter 3. We earned significant national and regional media last month in connecting communities while covering 400 miles of the Congressional district from Geneva to Dunkirk on foot. And we carried the momentum into an unexpected win at the straw poll put on by the 3 western counties of our district. Our momentum is building, and we're only getting started. I will not be a candidate just focused on doing what it takes to win the Democratic primary. I'm focused on what it takes for us to win back the general. That win won't come from a campaign alone. Only a movement will carry us there. A movement that stands up to our representative to say that tax giveaways to the wealthiest among us don't create jobs. They bankrupt our communities. That access to health care is important, but means little when you can't afford it. That disregarding the immediacy of climate change will leave our manufacturers behind and toss to the wind one of the largest Department of Defense stated threats to world security. That continually placing party, president, and personal profit above the good of the people you serve is certainly not patriotic. This movement must capture our roots as a party which puts people over politics, communities over corporations, of reasserting a needed moral and patriotic high ground in looking out for our neighbors and the least among us, to rise above all the divides and find the common ground needed to unite not just our party, but all people, and to work again for those who the system has been working against. Together we can get there.
Rick?
Thank you, and thank you to all of you guys. You know, it's not a very nice night out. It wasn't a real pretty drive. Normally it's a gorgeous drive. Of course, when you can see, it's always gorgeous. But so I appreciate everybody coming out and spending the night listening to us. As Ian said and others have said, our beef is not with each other. It never has been. We've been on this roadshow for a little while now. Our beef is with the person that occupies the seat as we speak. So we will maintain that, and we will fight together as we move forward, understanding what the ultimate goal is. And the ultimate goal is to take back this seat in the House. And I think we have a real good opportunity to do that. But this is a great crowd. From my perspective, a couple of things. We had great questions that covered a lot of things. I mentioned earlier, I have been a member of a labor union since 1980. I have been a part and advocate of workers' rights, of living wages depending on where you live, of retirement rights. We're taking a hit right now. We're taking a big hit. We're going to have a Supreme Court case in the Janus cases that'll come up and get acted on in the spring that's going to hurt us. But we have to work together. We have to pull on the rope in the same direction at the same time. A classic example of that is what just happened with the Constitutional Convention. We got all of teachers, we got all of labor, we got many, sorry, League of Women Voters, but we got many groups together on that. And not only did we win, and we just crushed it out of the water. We look at people like Dora Leland over here, people that really laid it out. We put a bunch of groups together and we were able to make something happen. And that's the exact same kind of thing that I think will happen not only with me but with us. That we will all come together in this and we will blow it out of the water.
Okay. Max?
When I tried cases as a litigator, I always had confidence in the jury. As long as I gave them the information that they needed to make that decision, I knew they'd get it right. I have the same confidence in you, the informed, engaged Tompkins County voters. As you consider something as important as this seat and this race, I would ask you to take the long view. Don't consider just the primary or the general, but and also don't make it a litmus test It shouldn't be just this person agrees with everything that I agree with. It needs to be the person who can win and turn this district blue. I am the person that can bring the largest number of voters together. I have the skills, the experience, and the leadership to do that. And why do I say that? As I canvass a very Republican neighborhood for only a few days, I came up with 65 people who said, I want to become a Democrat. I'm tired of what's happening. I believe you, I want to support you, and I want to sign your petition. So, I'm not sure of the final number, but I know the Democratic committee chairman said, this is the largest number of new Democrats we've had in my memory. I ran out of forms. I actually ran out of forms. I don't know what the final tally was, but I do know this, that whoever you decide to support, go all in. Convince your neighbor to do the same thing. Contribute. Get the vote out. Work. And let's work together to do something that we can all be proud of. Let's win in 2018 and turn this district blue. Thank you.
I just wanted to say that we were very pleased that we were asked to moderate and to be part of the organization of this candidates forum. I thought that the candidates really got to the heart of the issues. The questions were great. I wish we could have had more time to go over some more. But thank you very much. You have helped us reach our goal, and that is developing informed voters.
And how about a huge round of applause for our moderator? Thank you.
Don't forget to fill out your questionnaire.